It was a quiet Monday morning at the Brookdale police station, one of those small-town precincts where everyone knew everyone, and outsiders stood out like a sore thumb. The glass doors swung open, and in walked a tall man in a black leather jacket, dark glasses covering half his face. His walk was calm, slow, confident, the kind that made people instinctively turn their heads. But Sergeant Dan Miller, sitting behind the front desk with a cup of coffee and a half-eaten donut, didn't care who he was. He barely looked up. "Can I help you?" he said, voice flat, laced with arrogance. The stranger gave a slight nod. "I'm here to meet your chief." Miller let out a short laugh. "Yeah, right. And I'm the president. The chief doesn't meet random people off the street, pal." "You got an appointment?" The man simply replied, "He's expecting me." That calm confidence rubbed Miller the wrong way. He stood up, walked around the desk, and sized the man up. "Listen, tough guy, I don't know who you think you are, but this is a police station, not a movie audition. State your business or step outside." The stranger didn't flinch. "My name's Steven," he said quietly. Miller scoffed. "Steven what?" "Just Steven," came the reply. "That did it." The sergeant rolled his eyes, clearly losing patience. "You think you're some kind of celebrity, huh? I don't care who you are. You don't walk in here acting like you own the place." He moved closer, invading Steven's space. "You got ID?" Steven's tone stayed level, his voice deep and firm. "You don't want to do this, son." A few officers nearby exchanged glances. There was something about the man, the composure, the presence, that didn't fit the image of a regular visitor. But Miller didn't notice. "Is that a threat?" he barked. Steven took a slow breath. "No," he said softly. "That's advice." The room grew quiet. A tense pause hung between them, thick as smoke. And just as Miller reached out to grab Steven's shoulder, he had no idea who he was dealing with. Sergeant Miller's grip tightened on Steven's shoulder. The air in the station instantly grew heavy. "Didn't you hear me?" Miller barked. "You don't get to stroll in here and demand to see the chief. You either tell me who you're here for or you're out that door." Steven didn't move, didn't blink. His calmness made Miller even angrier. "I told you, son," Steven said in a quiet but controlled tone. "You don't want to do this, that was it." Miller's ego flared like gasoline meeting flame. "Oh, I don't want to do this. You're in my station, pal. You do what I say." He gave Steven a light shove toward the door, testing him. The man didn't budge. He stood like a statue, steady and grounded. A few officers sitting at their desks looked up from their paperwork, the tension drawing their attention. Sergeant," one of them murmured. "Maybe we should check who he is before—" But Miller cut him off with a glare. "I got this," Steven exhaled slowly. His tone dropped even lower, deep, commanding. "Son, you're about 3 seconds away from making a very big mistake." The words sent a chill through the room. But Miller's pride wouldn't let him stop. "Big mistake? You think you can scare me? You're nobody. Probably some washed-up martial arts nut. I've seen your type before." Steven simply tilted his head, saying nothing. His silence, his composure. It irritated Miller even more. He wanted a reaction, any reaction. "All right, that's it," Miller growled, grabbing Steven by the arm. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. Before anyone could blink, Steven turned his wrist slightly, barely a motion, and Miller's hand slipped free. It wasn't aggressive, just precise. The kind of move that said, "I know exactly how to handle you if I wanted to." Miller froze for a second, realizing what just happened. The man had reversed his grip with almost supernatural ease, but he covered his shock with more anger. "You just assaulted an officer," he shouted. The other officers stood now, uncertain. They didn't know whether to back their sergeant or step in. Steven didn't even raise his voice. "I didn't assault you," he said. "You put your hands on me. I just removed them." That calmness again, it was unnerving. He didn't sound scared. He didn't sound defensive. He sounded like a man completely in control of himself. And the situation. Miller puffed his chest, trying to regain dominance. "You think you're tough? Let's see how tough you are behind bars." He motioned to the others. "Cuff him!" But no one moved. Something about Steven's posture, the steadiness, the discipline, made even the rookies hesitate. Steven looked at the younger officers kindly. "Gentlemen," he said softly, "there's no need for this." Then looking back at Miller, "You can stop right now. No one needs to get hurt." The sergeant smirked, mistaking restraint for fear. "Oh, I like when they beg." A low murmur ran through the station. Everyone could feel it. Miller was out of line, his arrogance outweighing reason. But he didn't care. His pride was running the show. He jabbed his finger at Steven's chest. "I said, you're done here." Steven took one slow step back, not out of fear, but to give the man space. "Last warning," he said. "Don't touch me again." But Miller couldn't stop himself. "What are you gonna do, huh? Hit a cop?" He reached out again, his hand landing hard on Steven's shoulder. The moment his fingers made contact, the quietness in the room snapped. Chairs scraped. Radios crackled. And before anyone could process what was happening, Steven's hand moved like lightning. He twisted his wrist, redirected Miller's arm, and in one smooth motion, turned the sergeant around and guided him face first onto the desk. Not violently, just efficiently. The sound of impact echoed through the room. Gasps filled the air. Miller was stunned, pinned but unharmed. Steven's movements were precise, professional, like someone who'd done this 1,000 times without breaking a sweat. For a second, no one dared breathe. Steven leaned closer and spoke quietly, almost like a teacher correcting a student. "Control isn't about power. It's about knowing when not to use it." Then he released the sergeant, letting him stumble back, red-faced and humiliated. The room was dead silent. One of the officers whispered, "Who is this guy?" Miller, panting, turned red with rage. "You're done. You're under arrest. You hear me?" Steven adjusted his jacket calmly, looking him dead in the eye. "Do what you have to do," he said evenly. "But remember, I warned you." He turned slightly toward the room. "Now," he said with quiet confidence, "can someone inform your chief that I've arrived?" Every head turned to Miller, who was too furious to speak. The young rookie by the door picked up the phone, glancing nervously at Steven, then back at the sergeant. Sir," he said, "should I—" "Call the chief," Miller snapped. "No one calls anybody." But the rookie hesitated. His instincts told him this was no ordinary visitor. And as the seconds ticked by, that strange, heavy silence returned, the kind that only comes before something big happens. Have you ever seen someone disrespect the wrong person? Tell me in the comments. Also, where are you watching this from? Drop your country and city below. I love seeing how far these stories reach. For a few moments, nobody in the Brookdale police station dared to move. Sergeant Miller's ego was bruised, his pride shattered in front of his team. The man he'd just tried to manhandle had turned his attack into a lesson. Clean, effortless, and humiliating. "Did you see that?" One of the younger officers whispered. "He didn't even hit him." "Yeah," another muttered. "He just redirected him." But Miller's face had gone red with fury. He slammed his palm on the desk, rattling a cup of pens. "You think this is funny? You all think this is a joke?" He shouted, glaring at his subordinates. No one responded. All eyes were on Steven, calm, composed, standing like a rock in a storm. Miller's voice shook with rage. "You assaulted a police officer, and I'll make sure you spend the night in a cell for it." Steven didn't flinch. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "I didn't come here for trouble. But you're the one making it. That only made things worse." Miller's pride couldn't take it. He drew his baton from his belt with a loud click. "All right, tough guy," he said, stepping closer. "Let's see what kind of discipline you have when you're on the floor." A few officers stepped forward, trying to de-escalate. "Sergeant, please, he's not resisting. Let's just back off," Miller barked. "You want to side with him too?" The tension was boiling over. Steven stood motionless, his hands open, relaxed, the exact opposite of a man preparing to fight. Miller lunged forward, swinging the baton toward Steven's ribs. But in less than a second, Steven's hand shot up, catching Miller's wrist mid-swing. The impact never landed. The sound of the baton stopping mid-air echoed louder than any hit could. Gasps rippled across the room. Steven turned slightly, his grip firm but not violent. "You're angry," he said in a low voice, "because you feel disrespected. But respect isn't taken by force. It's earned by control." He released Miller's arm. For a second, it looked like the sergeant might finally calm down. But then, blinded by humiliation, Miller threw a wild punch. Bad idea. Steven sidestepped effortlessly, letting the sergeant's momentum carry him forward. In one fluid motion, Steven used Miller's own weight against him, guiding him face first into the padded holding room door. The impact was heavy but clean, controlled. The room froze. Two officers rushed forward, but Steven simply raised one hand. Nobody needs to get hurt, he said. His voice was calm, but there was authority in it, the kind that demanded instant obedience. Miller, dizzy and furious, staggered to his feet. "You're dead," he spat. "You hear me? Dead." He lunged again, but this time Steven stopped him mid-stride, twisting his arm and bringing him down in a clean Aikido takedown that left Miller immobilized on the ground. No punches, no rage, just mastery. Steven knelt beside him, voice low but firm. "You're supposed to protect people, not bully them. A man who can't control himself doesn't deserve power." Miller struggled, shouting curses, but Steven simply stood up and backed away. The younger officers didn't know what to do. They'd never seen a civilian handle a sergeant like this, yet do it with restraint and respect. One officer whispered, "Who is this guy?" Steven looked around at the room, scanning each face. His tone softened. "You all wear that badge for a reason," he said. "Don't forget what it stands for." He turned back toward the sergeant, still on his knees. "It's not too late to remember why you started." No one spoke. Even the hum of the air conditioning sounded loud in the silence. Steven walked toward the front desk, calmly placing the fallen baton on the counter. "Now," he said, "I'll wait for your chief." He then took a seat in the waiting area, crossing his arms calmly, like nothing had happened. The entire station just watched. Miller, still gasping from the encounter, finally shouted, "Don't just stand there. Cuff him!" But none of the other officers moved. They'd seen what he was capable of, but more importantly, how he'd handled it. There was strength in his control, not in aggression. "Sergeant," one officer said carefully, "maybe we should—" "Silence," Miller barked, red-faced. "He's going to regret this." He stormed into the back office, slamming the door behind him. Steven sat in silence, his expression unreadable. The tension hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. The rookie near the door whispered to another. If he wanted to, he could have dropped the sergeant in one hit. "Yeah," the other replied. But he didn't. That's the difference. Everyone knew something bigger was happening here, something way beyond what Miller could see. And as the seconds passed, the sound of an incoming car engine rumbled outside and the faint echo of authority arriving. Something told the room. The real chief was about to walk in. If you were in Steven's place, would you stay calm like him or fight back? Comment below. I want to see who'd keep control. For a long moment, the only sound inside the Brookdale police station was the ticking clock above the duty board. Sergeant Miller had stormed into his office, his pride bleeding harder than any bruise. The rest of the officers stood scattered, confused, nervous, and whispering among themselves. Steven sat quietly in the waiting area, hands resting on his knees, eyes lowered, the picture of calm. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He just waited, but that silence carried power. It was as if the entire room had shifted around him. One rookie officer, barely 24, leaned toward his partner and whispered, "That guy, he fights like someone trained in special ops. Did you see how he handled Miller?" His partner nodded. "Yeah, that wasn't street fighting. That was controlled, military, maybe even black ops level." Another officer at the back added quietly, "Wait, Steven, that name sounds familiar." "Familiar how?" "I don't know. Maybe from the academy, or some old case file." The whispers grew, bouncing softly around the station like a secret catching fire. Meanwhile, Steven remained still. His breathing was steady, his gaze distant, as if he'd already been through this 1,000 times before. Inside his office, Sergeant Miller paced back and forth, his anger mixing with a strange unease. He slammed the phone receiver down after failing to reach the chief's number. "How dare he walk in here and embarrass me in front of my men?" he muttered. But a small voice inside him, one he didn't want to hear, whispered, "What if he isn't just some random guy?" He pushed the thought away. No, he couldn't lose face. Not now. Back outside, the station doors opened. A middle-aged man in a gray jacket walked in, holding a briefcase. His eyes scanned the room before falling on Steven. He froze. "Wait," the man murmured. "Is that—" The younger officers turned to look. "Sir, do you know him?" The man adjusted his glasses, eyes widening. "Of course I do. That's Steven Seagal." The name hit the room like a thunderclap. Several officers blinked in disbelief. "Wait, the Steven Seagal? The martial arts legend? The former law enforcement trainer?" "Yeah," someone else said, scrolling through their phone in shock. Look, and that's him. He's worked with law enforcement before, even trained special units. The whispers became a buzz. Every officer in the room was now glued to Steven, piecing together what they'd just witnessed. Miller's office door burst open again. "What's all this noise?" he barked. But this time the atmosphere had changed. The respect in the air had shifted, away from him. One of the younger officers, still holding his phone, said hesitantly, "Sir, I think you should see this." Miller snatched the phone, and his eyes widened. There it was, a photo of Steven Seagal in uniform, shaking hands with law enforcement officials, captioned, "Steven Seagal appointed Deputy Chief of Police, Jefferson Parish." The blood drained from his face. He turned slowly toward the man sitting calmly in the waiting chair, the same man he'd tried to humiliate minutes earlier. Steven met his gaze, expression unreadable. "I told you I was here to see the chief," he said quietly. Miller swallowed hard, suddenly unsure what to do with his hands. You're that Steven Seagal?" Steven stood up, his presence towering but not threatening. "That depends," he said. "Are you ready to listen now?" Miller took a shaky breath. I didn't realize who you were." Steven interrupted softly. "That's the problem, Sergeant. You didn't have to know who I was. You just had to treat me with respect." The words hit harder than any strike. The entire room was silent again, not out of fear, but awe. Miller lowered his gaze, humiliation mixing with regret. "Sir, I apologize for my behavior earlier. I shouldn't have—" Steven held up a hand. "Apologies aren't for me. They're for the badge you wear." He turned to the other officers. "When you abuse power, you lose trust. And when trust is gone, the badge means nothing." The younger officers looked at each other, absorbing every word. Then the door opened once more. A voice came from the entrance, firm, deep, and commanding. "What's going on in my station?" All eyes turned. It was Chief Daniels, the actual head of the Brookdale precinct, and a tall, broad man in his 50s. His expression was sharp, scanning the room instantly. But when he saw Steven, his face changed completely. Surprise flickered, then respect. He walked forward quickly, extending his hand. "Mr. Seagal," he said warmly. "Welcome back." The entire room froze again. Sergeant Miller's jaw dropped. "Back?" he whispered. Chief Daniels smiled. "Didn't anyone tell you? Mr. Seagal's been reassigned here for evaluation. He's our new acting chief of operations." The color drained from Miller's face completely. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Steven gave a small nod, his voice calm but cutting. "Now you understand why I asked for the chief. If you were Steven, would you reveal your identity early, or wait until the right moment like he did? Comment your answer and tell me what city or country you're watching from." The room was frozen. Nobody dared to move, speak, or even breathe too loudly. Sergeant Miller stood there pale as a ghost, his baton still lying on the floor, a symbol of how fast the tables had turned. Steven looked around the station slowly, his calm eyes sweeping across the faces of every officer who'd just witnessed everything. His presence carried the weight of both quiet strength and moral authority. Chief Daniels turned toward the stunned room. "Everyone gather up," he ordered. "Now." Chairs scraped, boots shuffled, and within seconds every officer stood in a semicircle facing Steven. The energy in the room was electric, part fear, part respect. Steven didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Before we talk about leadership," he began, "we need to talk about accountability." His tone was calm, but each word landed like a hammer. He turned his gaze to Sergeant Miller, who was still struggling to meet his eyes. "This man," Steven continued, "looked at me and saw someone to intimidate, not someone to protect. He didn't ask who I was, didn't ask what I needed. He just saw what he wanted to see and reacted with arrogance." Miller's face tightened. "Sir, Steven raised a hand. "Don't speak. Just listen." The silence was absolute. Even Chief Daniels stayed quiet. "I've been in law enforcement long enough to know that power changes people," Steven went on. "A badge can be a weapon, or it can be a shield. The difference depends on the heart of the one wearing it." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Then he stepped closer to Miller, not menacingly but firmly. "You think strength comes from shouting orders," Steven said softly, "but real strength comes from restraint, from treating people with dignity even when you don't have to." Miller's lips trembled slightly. "Sir, I didn't know who you were." Steven nodded. "Exactly. You shouldn't have to know. That's the whole point. He turned to the rest of the officers. Every person who walks through those doors deserves respect. Whether it's a senator, a janitor, or a stranger asking for help, you don't get to decide who's worthy of decency. The young rookies looked down at their boots. A few older officers nodded slowly, the truth sinking in. Chief Daniels finally spoke. He's right. This station's been losing its way. Getting too comfortable, too cocky. That ends today. Steven glanced at him and nodded once. Then he faced the room again. You don't need fear to earn obedience. You need integrity to earn trust. That's what makes a department strong. He walked toward the whiteboard at the back of the room and picked up a marker. On it, he wrote 3 words in large, bold letters. Honor, discipline, respect. He turned back to the officers. These aren't just words. They're the foundation of every great force I've ever worked with. Without them, the badge is just metal. No one spoke. The message was clear. Steven took a slow breath. Effective immediately, he said. I'll be conducting an internal review of conduct and ethics in this precinct. Every complaint, every use of force report on them, we'll go through them one by one. The room stirred. Some officers looked nervous, others relieved. He continued, I'm not here to punish. I'm here to rebuild. But anyone who uses that badge to feed their ego, you're done. Chief Daniels crossed his arms, a faint smirk on his face. Looks like the department's about to get a wake-up call. Steven's gaze returned to Miller. Sergeant, he said, you have 2 choices. Learn from this, nor find a new badge to wear. Miller lowered his head, his voice trembling. Sir, I understand. I'll do better, I promise. Steven studied him for a moment, then nodded. That's a start. But don't promise me. Prove it to the people you serve. The other officers exchanged glances. A few even clapped quietly, hesitant at first, then stronger. The tension began to dissolve, replaced with a strange feeling of pride. Steven's words had done more than calm the chaos. He had reminded them why they joined the force in the first place. He turned back toward the room, his tone softening. You all wear a symbol that people are supposed to trust. If the community fears you, then we're failing at our job. From now on, every decision you make it as if someone's recording you, because the truth is someone always is. A few heads nodded, understanding fully. Steven gave a faint smile. I'm not here to be your enemy. I'm here to make sure you can be proud of your uniform again. The chief clapped a hand on Steven's shoulder. You heard the man, Daniel said. Get ready for a new chapter, folks. Chief Seagal means business. That name echoed like a thunderclap. Chief Seagal. Miller straightened his uniform slowly, still processing everything. Chief Seagal, he repeated under his breath, disbelief mixed with respect. Steven turned toward him one last time. Power doesn't make a man strong, Sergeant, he said. Character does. Then he looked at the room once more. Let's get to work. And just like that, the station, moments ago filled with chaos and tension, was now filled with resolve. The transformation had begun. If you were Chief Seagal, would you forgive the sergeant or suspend him to set an example? Comment your answer and type honor if you believe respect must come before power. The next morning, Brookdale Police Station was buzzing. The story of what had happened the day before had spread like wildfire, not just through the precinct, but throughout the entire town. Everyone was talking about it. A mysterious man had walked into the station, disarmed a raging sergeant, and turned out to be the new chief. Now, Chief Steven Seagal's first day in office was about to begin. Inside the briefing room, officers sat quietly in their seats. The usual chatter was gone, replaced by a respectful silence that no one dared break. Steven walked in, calm and confident, wearing the same black jacket from the day before. His presence commanded attention without a single word. Chief Daniels stood beside him. Gentlemen, he said, you're looking at the man who's going to help us rebuild this department's reputation. Listen closely, as you'll want to remember this day. Steven nodded and began to speak. Yesterday I saw what happens when ego replaces service. But I also saw something else, potential. He paused, scanning their faces. This station has good men and women. You just need to remember who you serve. Then from the back of the room came an unexpected voice. Chief, what about Sergeant Miller? The room went still. All eyes turned toward the door. Miller stood there, uniform pressed, face clean-shaven, but eyes heavy with shame. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. Permission to speak, sir? He said quietly. Steven nodded. Go ahead. Miller's voice trembled. I was wrong, Chief. The way I acted, it was out of pride, not professionalism. I disrespected the badge, this department. And you. He hesitated, then continued. If you think I don't deserve to wear this uniform anymore, I'll hand it in right now. The entire room watched, breath held. Steven studied him for a moment, then walked forward slowly. Sergeant Miller, he said, you made a mistake, a big one. But what matters is whether you learn from it. Miller met his eyes, desperate. I will, sir. I swear I will. Steven placed a hand on his shoulder. Then prove it. Not to me, to the people you serve. A murmur rippled through the room. Everyone knew what this meant. Miller wasn't off the hook, but he was being given something rare in a place like this. A second chance. Steven continued, addressing everyone. The true measure of a man isn't whether he falls. It's whether he gets back up better than before. That line hit home. Several officers nodded subtly. Even the rookies who'd once admired Miller's bravado now saw something different in him. Humility. Then Steven added, starting today, this department will open its doors. Every Saturday we'll hold open forums with the community. We'll listen. We'll learn. We'll rebuild trust one conversation at a time. The chief smiled proudly. That's leadership, Daniels said under his breath. But the day's test wasn't over yet. That afternoon, as Steven and Miller walked outside the station for a press announcement, a small crowd had gathered. News vans, reporters, and curious townspeople filled the sidewalk. Whispers filled the air. That's the new chief. The martial arts guy. He took down a sergeant. A reporter shouted, Chief Seagal! Is it true you physically restrained an officer yesterday? Steven faced the crowd calmly. It's true, he said, but not because I wanted to. I did what I had to stop a bad decision before it got worse. Another reporter asked, and what's your message to those who say police officers abuse their power? Steven looked directly into the camera. Power without compassion is corruption. The badge doesn't make you better than others. It makes you responsible for them. The crowd murmured in approval. Even the reporters, known for pushing buttons, stayed quiet for a second. Then, in a powerful moment, Steven turned to Miller, the same man who had once tried to humiliate him, and said, this man here represents something important. Redemption, because every officer who's lost his way can still find it again. The cameras clicked. Phones recorded. That single line, power without compassion is corruption, spread across social media within hours. By evening, millions had seen the clip. Comments flooded in. Respect to Chief Seagal, a real leader. We need more people like this in uniform. He turned humiliation into a life lesson. And through it all, Steven never once bragged or sought praise. He simply led by example, letting his actions speak louder than his words. Back inside the station later that night, Miller approached him quietly. Chief, he said, thank you for not giving up on me. Steven smiled faintly. Just don't give up on yourself, Sergeant, because one day someone will be watching you to learn what real discipline looks like. Miller nodded, eyes glassy. Yes, sir. Steven patted his shoulder and walked toward his office, the weight of leadership sitting comfortably on his back. He didn't need applause. He didn't need revenge. He'd already won, by restoring honor where there once was pride. Would you forgive someone like Chief Seagal did? Or would you make them face strict punishment first? Comment below your answer, and tell me what city or country you're watching from. By morning, the video had reached every corner of the internet. News anchors replayed the clip of Chief Steven Seagal standing beside Sergeant Miller. His voice calm yet commanding. Power without compassion is corruption. Those 6 words ignited something deeper than just a headline. They became a movement. Across social media, hashtags exploded. Chief Seagal, respect before power, real leadership. Clips of the incident flooded TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook. Some users called it the most powerful police moment of the decade. Even people who didn't know Steven's background as a martial artist, actor, or former law enforcement trainer were sharing the story. It wasn't about fame anymore. It was about integrity. In the following days, Steven received messages from around the world, from officers, veterans, even citizens who had once lost faith in justice. One message stood out from a small-town police officer in Brazil. Sir, your words reminded me why I joined the force, to protect, not control. Thank you. Another came from a high school student in the Philippines. You taught me that being strong isn't about fighting. It's about staying calm when others lose control. Steven read every message quietly in his office, never once seeking credit. Meanwhile, the Brookdale station began to transform. Officers started greeting locals by name again. Body cams were worn with pride, not fear. Community meetings became regular, honest, and heartfelt. Even Sergeant Miller changed. One evening, he stayed late at the station reviewing citizen complaints. He didn't have to, it wasn't required. But he did it because something inside him had shifted. When Steven passed by, he paused at the door. "Still here?" he asked. Miller looked up. "Trying to fix the mess I helped create, sir." Steven nodded approvingly. "That's how real leaders are made, Sergeant. By owning the past, not running from it." The two men exchanged a quiet look, one of respect, not rank. Outside, the world continued to react. News outlets ran the headline, "Chief Seagal turns abuse of power into global lesson on respect." Talk shows debated it. Teachers used the story in classrooms. Even politicians quoted his line during speeches. And yet Steven never took interviews. He didn't post online or chase the spotlight. He simply continued his duty. Calm, steady, grounded. Because for him, the real victory wasn't viral fame. It was walking into that same station every morning and seeing a team that now stood taller, spoke kinder, and remembered why they wore the badge. A week later, Chief Daniels stopped by his office. "You realize," he said with a grin, "you've done more for this precinct in 7 days than most chiefs do in 7 years. Steven smiled faintly. "I didn't do anything special. I just reminded them who they are," the chief chuckled. "Yeah, well, sometimes people need reminding." Steven looked out the window, the sun dipping low over the city skyline. "Respect," he said softly. "It's the easiest thing to give, and the hardest thing to earn." As the scene faded, the world kept watching, replaying, and remembering the day a man walked into a police station as a stranger and left as a symbol of justice, humility, and true power. If you believe no one should ever be judged by appearance, and that real strength lies in respect, type respect in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one.